Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
January 25th, the Red Wings have 69 points. Evan?
Nice.
Is anyone going to be brave enough to say it?
Nope.
Don't be a coward, Brad. You want to do it so bad. This is how you shake the curse of what you did a couple of years ago. Just call it, Brad. What do you think?
You think the curse is gone? I don't want to double down on it.
It's not gonna go because you're not doubling down.
Ryan,
Grow up.
Think of everything that happened today leading to this episode and tell us we're not cursed.
We barely even made it to be able to record. Brad nearly died. We were trying to do this fast and furious handoff of a mic because we're all stupid. It's not like we've been recording this podcast for 11 years. He doesn't even get his mic, and our recording would not start. So fair warning to folks, 3 of us have our normal mics. Brad's going to sound a bit different today. Apologies as we go through Snowmageddon through all of North America. Max Bultman of the Athletic Detroit, one of our good friends, maybe no longer as he had to sit and watch what we just did for 30 minutes, has been here waiting patiently the entire time. It's a miracle. If this show reaches your ears, dear listener, it'll be a small miracle. Anyways, Brad, call it. Say the Red Wings are going to make it. Do it. Do the favor for our friends with the Red Wings, the media team. Give them something to work with.
You have no idea how much you would need to pay me to utter that sentence right now.
Can't be that much.
No, I'm a poor. It's like $17, but are you going to fork it up?
I mean, I won't. Evan might. Max, would you call it for the Red Wings right now?
17 Canadian or 17 US?
Hold on. Let's not get crazy. Good Lord. That's Monopoly money conversion.
I think they're going to make it. I mean, is that...
Say it. Say the words.
They're on a 100-point pace, guys. Like, they're in a good
think
spot.
Doesn't count. I think we all give them a greater than 50% chance right now, but that's not a declaration.
Max is the boldest of all of us.
It's very tight. Like a lot can change, but they are in a great spot.
There you go, right on that fence. Like he's mastered the Evan sweet spot right there. Max, I might even go out and say they're a pretty good hockey team. I'll go out on that limb.
Folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. This is the most delirious start to an episode we've had in a long time, so bear with us. Recording remotely, featuring Max Bultman of the Athletic Detroit, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
I'm Max Bultman. And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be covering the 2 Red Wings games that have happened since we last spoke, the Minnesota overtime loss, and then the Winnipeg win last night. The takeaways from those games, storylines from the Red Wings, including John Gibson, Marco Kasper, Albert Johansson, and more. We are going to be getting into trade talk as Max talks to us about his trade board coming up on the Athletic Detroit as well. We're going to be discussing whether the Red Wings need to make a move for a defenseman, as Yzerman may need to shore up that depth, and whatever else we get into before overtime. Very quickly, 2 things. First, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to support the show. Get access to bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones. We let loose, we have fun. You get bloopers, outtakes. I think there's going to be some things from pre-recording that's going to kick off this bonus overtime episode, so it's a good time. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. We give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. And secondly, Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA, Saturday, March 21st against the Boston Bruins. Your ticket gets you a discounted game ticket to the Red Wings game, as well as access to the pregame live recording of the Winged Wheel Podcast at Little Caesars Arena, featuring not just us, the host, but also Ken Daniels and other special guests to be announced. You also get a piece of co-branded Detroit Red Wings and Winged Wheel Podcast limited edition merch. This time it's a cream and red color scheme Centennial hat with the Red Wings Centennial logo on the front and our Winged Wheel Podcast logo patch on the side. It is unreal. And every ticket represents a donation to the Jamie Daniels Foundation as well. So wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings. All right, let's kick things off with the Minnesota game. And this Minnesota game was on a back-to-back. Detroit played the night before at 7, and then they played at 9:30. And this is Eastern time, but they played in the Central time zone So they traveled time zones back-to-back on the road, and they played a very strong, one of the best teams in the league in the Minnesota Wild. And it's not a game where people had a lot of ambition for the Red Wings. Pre-game, we got word that Simon Edvinsson was out. He took warm-ups. He came out. He couldn't go. Axel Sandin-Pellikka was actually supposed to sit, but instead, Edvinsson was out of that game. And Detroit walked away with a point. Wasn't so straightforward as they, scrounged it up. I think it could have been more, but that was a surprising game overall. What do you make of it, Max?
I think it's a great point, and it's a phrase you got to be careful using too often through a season, because a lot of the time you get to OT and, it's a coin flip, but you get there and you're kind of like, okay, great point, but you maybe should have gotten the 2. This one, in the circumstances, both with where they were on the schedule, with where they were at with the lineup, with no Edvinsson, and with who the opponent was, I think it's a very good point. Now, I don't think it was the cleanest end to a game I've seen. Like, I think you want to see the Red Wings put a little more of a stamp on their leads late in the game. They let 2 go right after they had taken leads. But that being said, I liked Minnesota to win this game by at least a goal coming in. And so I do think getting out of there in the circumstances is a big success.
And factoring in that if you're going to, lose a point in the standings and thus give up an extra point, better do it to a Western Conference team and not a divisional opponent. So if you're going to play a good team and, like Max said, blow a couple leads, that extra point goes to the Western Conference. So at least that's a silver lining.
Here's one of my takeaways from this game, and I know that this is a Red Wings podcast. Matt Zuccarello may be the player that is the most underrated, at least in my head, in the league. Like, for what he consistently produces and where I think of him, that gap is wide. He is an excellent offensive producer for a guy that I kind of just brush aside as like a middle 6 guy. He was so dangerous that whole night.
We love our short kings here.
Yes. Speaking of which, Quinn Hughes also, as advertised, like, we don't need to talk about what that means to watch him do that. But yeah, Minnesota's a credit to Bill Guerin. That team has taken a big step with him. And I think you're 100% right, Max. There's going to be a lot of those guys, I think, on the Wild who are going to be a little bit unlocked in terms of the attention that they get if they do take the step that Bill Guerin wants them to have taken, which Quinn Hughes helps with. So the way the game scoring went, Lucas Raymond actually opened scoring in the first period on the power play from Seider and Larkin. Another extremely well-placed shot. I feel like we call every third goal of Raymond's lately a snipe. Evan, I think you tweeted out after that he could have a 40-50 goal season if he shoots like that all the time, which he can't do.
Well, teams are going to start to take notice of his release and his ability to score, so that'll open up time for his line mates, right? Like, and it'll help his playmaking game as well. Yeah, his release is so underrated. I just wish he would continue. He's been shooting a lot more recently. It's great, but I just wish he would keep doing more of it.
It's been a big area of emphasis from Todd McLellan of something that he's thrown the number 300 shots around is what he wants Raymond to do in a season. It's 51 games in. He's at 107, so he's not even close to that. But you're right. Recently, like last 2 games, 3 per game, 2 per game going into that, which is about his season rate. But I think if you can get more 3.5 to 4 shots a game is what McLellan's looking for him to be at. So at least trending in the right direction. And I do think if he gets 300 shots this season, he's going to score 40 goals.
And I wonder how much of that, too, has to do with his shoulder health as well. But he's been trending in the right direction. We'll talk more in a bit, but he's one of those guys where not too long ago, we were like, he's really struggling alongside Larkin, and you can't really be disappearing, but he's turned that narrative around fast. And who else scores the second goal for the Red Wings after Kirill Kaprizov tied it? Lucas Raymond capitalizes on a forced turnover by Marco Kasper. He's all alone in front, makes no mistake, and puts the Red Wings up 2-1. Zuccarello, as you mentioned, Max, ties the game 2-2 at the start of the third, and then James Van Riemsdyk scores his 14th of the season. Seemed like a simple play, but when you look at how it happened, just a ridiculous read by a veteran, like a pro's pro of the game. Finnie stops up on the sidewall, great feed to JVR, who's got a man on him, reads the play, sees where the puck is coming in from, and does a kind of spinning, no-look backhand redirect to put the puck in. There's nobody in this league right now who's commanding that net front area more effectively than JVR in my mind, and you can argue with a wall for all I care. That guy's been... we should just have a soundboard button, which is just us waxing poetic about JVR. This guy doesn't stop.
It's a great play by Finnie, too, to set it up. I mean, when you're dealing with James Van Riemsdyk, it is as simple as get it around there and he's going to make something good happen with it. I mean, he didn't get a lot of that. That thing had to trickle in. But that's the way things are going for him right now. He almost has the Midas touch in that area.
And I was going to say, with the Minnesota game being the preview and the Winnipeg game being kind of proof of concept, is this the first time all year, despite the Red Wings being good, but the first time all year, it looks like the Red Wings have 3 legitimately dangerous lines? Because Kasper's going well with Larkin and Raymond. Finnie, JVR, and even to the next game, Compher, look like they've got some chemistry. And obviously, the second line's been great for a while. I just feel like this is the first time, at least in a long while, I've been watching this team where I'm not pessimistic when at least one line's rolling over the boards.
And it's interesting because the other line you didn't say, I think, is playing some of its best hockey too. Like Elmer Soderblom has been as noticeable over this last 2 weeks or so as I feel like he's been consistently in a long time. He would always show you a game or two like this, but really noticeable with both his body and his skill. Puck hasn't really gone for him yet, but it just feels like if he keeps playing like this, it will. Appleton's perfectly suited in that kind of checking role. Rasmussen's leveled off a bit from where he was at, but I'm still noticing him pretty often. He's still getting to pucks that he needs to get to. So it does look like a really complete lineup, and at a very important time of year for the depth to be showing up like that, right? Like I think there's kind of been flashes of it at times in the last 2 or 3 years, and then we're a month away from March, but we're also only a few games away from March because of the Olympic break. So on the NHL calendar, it's starting to show up at the right time.
So Zuccarello ends up tying that game for the Wild, and in overtime, Kaprizov goes in and scores what he believes to be a little bit of a revenge goal. Didn't like how he went into the boards. Looked like he got tangled up with Larkin. I watched that back as many times as I could find angles of, and I really don't understand why the Wild were so incensed about that. I guess in the moment, if you didn't see it, and your view was blocked by the net, it looked like Larkin tripped Kaprizov behind the net before that play came forward, but unless there's an angle I miss, I think that was just maybe a toe pick, maybe Larkin's blade clipped Kaprizov's skate a little bit. It looked like he went down pretty easy in my mind. Regardless, Kaprizov goes down, wins the game, and secures the win for Minnesota. And more on, the things that didn't go well for Detroit, but I didn't get that whole Kaprizov-Larkin thing. Like that seemed...
It's as simple as your best player going down behind the net, right? Like no team's going to like that, and whether they saw the replay or not, I'm skeptical that they, after seeing a slow-mo, would be that fired up about it. And yet, It is Kirill Kaprizov, and he's down. And if you're the Wild, that's like the scariest sight imaginable. So that's, I think, where it comes from. I think any Red Wings fan would feel the same way if it was Lucas Raymond or Moritz Seider or Dylan Larkin.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. And so Detroit, I think fans were justifiably a bit disappointed because they had the lead in the third. And, it would have been nice to walk away with a sneaky 2 points there. But at the end of the day, an overtime loss with the travel and the back-to-back that you had being on the road against such a good team, it's not the worst result. And you were missing Simon Edvinsson. I think personally, when I was watching that game, the things that didn't go well for Detroit, you had to overplay Travis Hamonic. And there isn't a person who's watching that game from the Red Wings side of things, from the coach to the GM to the players to the fans, who didn't expect that, right? Like the Red Wings didn't want to be in that position, but it's when Edvinsson was out last minute, it's just kind of what you're doing. And so Hamonic didn't look great, bad penalties. And obviously, if you were at the point where you're about to sit ASP and then all of a sudden he's in the game, like there's 2 defensemen right there that you don't inherently trust, and you have to play them way more than you thought you would be that night. Talbot, I don't want to say was bad, but some of the goals that went in were kind of leaky. He could have been better, but all in all, I think was probably the most expected result.
And that's something the Red Wings are going to have to manage. Like I think they're doing the right thing riding John Gibson. He's playing as well as any goalie in the league right now. But there's always drawbacks. A, you don't want to overwork John Gibson too much, and that's something to be conscious of. And B, the less of a rhythm Cam Talbot gets, I think the more susceptible any goalie is going to be to a leaky one. And to me, it was like the second one that like it's in the neighborhood. He can't really quite get his glove over it to get that freeze, and then it ends up just getting kind of poked behind him. None of the first 3 goals I thought were like amazing for Minnesota, but the second one was the one where you're like, I think if Cam Talbot's in rhythm, he finds a way to find a whistle there instead. And that's just part of the trade-off of riding John Gibson as much as they have. I think it's worth it for as good as John Gibson's been, but you just got to be able to live with it a little bit.
So Detroit walks away from that game and heads into the last stop on their mini road trip in Winnipeg on Saturday night. Prior to that game, we got notice from Todd McLellan, who said Simon Edvinsson's lower body injury would keep him out that game as well. and that he will, quote, be looked at when we get back to Detroit this week, try and determine what path he's taking. So doesn't inspire confidence. I think the silver lining, if he's going to miss any time here, any extended time, is what Max mentioned before, which is there aren't so many games before the Olympic break. So if this is weeks, well, a couple of those weeks don't necessarily matter because there are games. I think with the injuries to Team Sweden, this is ill-timed for Simon Edvinsson himself. If this is, taking a toll and keeping him out for any extended period of time, because he would have liked to have been an injury replacement for the Olympics for Team Sweden. But all that aside, the Red Wings head into Winnipeg again without Edvinsson. This time a different result, though. A massive win where it was a flurry of goals, it felt like all at the end, but a huge win on the road in a game where, even more so than the Wild game, I think everyone was expecting Detroit's going to have a hard time here, but they took advantage of a Wild team who I don't think played that well. I think the coach doesn't think they played that well based on the comments after, and led by a couple goals by JT Compher, John Gibson winning his 8th straight game for the second time this season. Lucas Raymond stays hot. Marco Kasper stays hot. It was just the Red Wings really, that was an extremely impressive performance all around, considering who they were missing and the toll on their team from the travel.
This is one of those games where I think a goalie makes a huge difference, but not in the way that you normally think of a goalie stealing a game, because by and large, Detroit was the better team for a majority of the game. And the first 2 periods I would classify as more on the sleepy end of the NHL. But there was a stretch early in the second period, don't remember the exact timestamps, but I don't know what happened to the Red Wings. They looked discombobulated in their own zone, and Winnipeg had many grade A chances in fairly quick succession, and Gibson got all of them, except for the one rebound, but he was just in control. He was controlling his rebounds. He was making the saves, and like a couple of the chances were Kyle Connor. It's not exactly like you got Ryan Reeves trying to snipe one on you. You got one of the purest snipers in the NHL, and Gibson's making it look easy. They weathered that storm because of John Gibson, who then admittedly didn't have a whole lot to do the rest of the game. But that bridge from a sleepy game to a meltdown to now he's letting his team control the game, which again, to the rest of the Red Wings' credit, they did. But without that stretch from Gibson, this game could look very, very different. And it's nice to see the Red Wings reward him for that effort to keep him in it.
Yeah, how many times over the last few years have we seen the Red Wings be on the other end of a game like this, where it's a tight game, it's a 1-0 game, and then one goal goes in the start of the third period and it just all spirals, and all of a sudden it's a 5-1 loss. It feels like I've seen that game 10, 15 times out of the Red Wings in the last 2 or 3 years. They're on the other side of this now. And part of that is John Gibson, for sure, to Brad's point. Like, he kept them in it until they kind of found the punch and they kind of broke a team that was ready to break, right? Like the Jets have had a deflating season. But part of it is what Ryan mentioned earlier in the depth, right? Like, you're getting big goals from JT Compher on a night where, the Larkin line took a little while to kind of find itself. Then Lucas Raymond, who's hot, gets going there. Marco Kasper quietly picking up steam. That's a really encouraging sign for the Red Wings, and it just kind of all goes in their favor in the end. The depth wins out in the end, but they had to ride it, and they're in a third game in 4 nights. They're in a tough spot schedule-wise, and they're in a city that is freezing cold. I'm sure there's a little bit of let's get home. They play the game, they ride it out until they're able to kind of take it over at the end. And I thought that was a really encouraging game from them.
Yeah, didn't the Red Wings admin tweet something from a Frozen lyrics? The cold never bothered me anyway. I think everyone was feeling that. There's a reason why a lot of players have Winnipeg on their no-trade list. It's not a secret. So walking through the goals, after Detroit goes down 1-0 in the second period, JT Compher scores in front from Kopp. And we thought maybe Patrick Kane, but it did hit off the Winnipeg Jets player's skate before it got to Kopp. And so they didn't have the assist for Kane, and then they awarded the secondary assist, and then they rescinded it after the second period was over. So Kane at that point was still 2 points away from Mike Modano for the tie for the all-time points lead among American-born players. Regardless, Detroit's tied 1-1, and then at the start of the third, JT Compher on the rush from Finnie and JVR scores his second of the game, his 8th of the season, as Max mentioned. Great depth support. And then Lucas Raymond from Marco Kasper and Bernard Docker, as Raymond stays hot and, like I mentioned before, completely changes the narrative on how this point of the season has been for him. It was one of those funny goals where you weren't sure whether it was going to count or not. It looked like a high stick. Winnipeg was calling for it. Kasper did take a swipe at it, and it would have been a high stick, but thankfully he missed the puck, and so it counted as Lucas Raymond's goal. And then that was 3-1. Alex DeBrincat scored on the empty net from Kopp and Kane. This time, the secondary assist counted. And then the goalie's back in the net. Hellebuck's back in the net. End of the game. Kasper from Raymond. Kasper on the break comes in, has a shot one-on-one against Hellebuck, makes no mistake, beats him 5-1 in a game that was already sealed with an empty netter. But I think you mentioned, Brad, online, like that was probably one of the most important 5-1 goals the Red Wings will ever have in recent memory, I should say, because of what that means for Kasper's confidence.
Yeah, just to beat a goalie, because he had the empty netter against San Jose, and then I think his last goal was about 9 months ago. So just to have that in your mind that, right, this is what this feels like. And it's Connor Hellebuck too. And it was a small thing I've been noticing from Kasper where it's not the biggest deal in the world, but in the NHL, it's the biggest deal in the world, where it felt like he was rushing all his shots. He would have the puck in that exact spot, and instead of taking the 1 or 2 extra steps that he has the space to make, he's just shooting it. And in the NHL, with some of those goalies, you're not beating them from the top of the circle or even a few more feet out from where he was. And I honestly think the inconsequential nature of that goal is why he did it, because he's like, this doesn't matter. If they poke the puck away from me or whatever, it doesn't matter. It has no outcome on the game. So he took the extra step to get that much closer, get the shot off and score. So hopefully, because I've seen this happen with players 100 times over my life, all the way from house league to the NHL, where just that one drops and he realizes, I didn't lose the puck in that scenario. I have the time to take that extra step. I'm not saying this is going to turn him back into a 20, 30 goal scorer, but there's definitely going to be a part of his mind that goes, I have the extra second. And in the NHL, that is a long time. Which
he also looks off Dylan Larkin, who's on that 2-on-1 with him, right? And then he beats Connor Hellebuck, one of the 5 best goalies in the league. So you're right. One play doesn't change everything, but this is not just one play now. This is a run of 5 games now where he's been very productive. He made I don't even remember which game it was, but that super highlight reel assist. I think it may be San Jose. And you're starting to stack moments. I mean, on the Raymond goal, which game was that? I think that was the Minnesota game. Kasper's stick creates that on the forecheck, and he gets a piece of it. It trickles to Raymond all alone out in front. He's starting to stack plays here where it looks a lot like the Marco Kasper we saw right around this time last year. So a lot of encouraging stuff coming from him.
So fun fact, through his first 47 games, Marco Kasper had, I think it was 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points. In his last 5 games, he has 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. 50% of his points have come in the last 5 games. Small sample, sure. You're not going to make, broad sweeping claims about a whole season, but this is 5 games, and I think they were preceded even by a few games where he was looking better before the results start to show up. So this is really big, and we're going to put a pin in that for a second. We're going to circle back to Kasper and Johansson and a couple other guys. I mentioned before, John Gibson, that made it 8 straight wins for him yet again, joins none other than Chris Osgood as the only other goaltender in Red Wings franchise history to have multiple 8-game win streaks in a single season. And that number now, Evan, he's up to a 906.
It's
ticking up.
Getting close. You're looking smarter every percentage point that goes up.
Ryan, I forgot to point it out to you. It happened. I was listening to someone in the national hockey media landscape who floated the idea that John Gibson may just creep into a Vezina nom.
I'm not stupid and crazy. I was stupid and early. That was my problem with my John Gibson hot take. But it's the same thing as we talked about last episode. The guy's just been a force, and he's one of the many important components, but I think the most important cog that has given Detroit the ability to stay in games, like what Max referenced earlier, where previously in recent years, it would get away from them and it didn't need to. He's the biggest X factor so far for the Red Wings. The Red Wings win. They get to 69 points, temporarily in the lead for the Atlantic. The Lightning are just perpetually having 3 games in hand, but still back on top for Detroit, a 5-game point streak. Actually, before we talk more about the Red Wings, I want to shout out Frank Corrado, who obviously Max you'll be familiar with. He's does work with the Athletic Hockey Show and Overdrive, and so he's no newbie to the media landscape, but he stepped in as Mickey Redmond continues to recover from a successful surgery. He steps in alongside Ken Daniels on the call, and he sounded great last night. Sounded like a natural. You almost wouldn't believe that he was an NHL player because there was none of the robotic nature to it. So shout out to Frankie. That was he was awesome on the call.
He always is. He's really sharp. I mean, this is a good, nobody's Mickey Redmond, right? But I think for Red Wings fans to have someone as good as Frankie filling in is really a treat.
So obviously the big news for Detroit is, how high they are in the standings and the fact that they came away with 5 of 6 possible points on a little mini road trip here and with a really tough scheduling. But a lot of this is coming from guys who I think are a little bit unsung on the score sheet. Lucas Raymond turning it around, absolutely. He's all over the score sheet. John Gibson continuing to be a stalwart in net, 100%. But Albert Johansson and Marco Kasper are two guys. I know Kasper has the points now, but are two guys who I think have really turned around their game. We talked about Kasper, but Johansson as well. Prashanth wrote an article. I'll link it in the description, but this was a guy who wasn't looking impressive at the start of the year for the first half of the season. He was looking a little leaky, like he was unsettled, couldn't be relied on, not as steady as last season, and was kind of part of the depth issue in Detroit. But he's been quietly here, both the eye test and the numbers have backed it up. He's out there winning shifts and not letting the bottom pair be a automatic black hole for Detroit.
They're not the bottom pair right now, Ryan. He and Jacob Bernard-Docker are playing as the second pair right now with Simon Edvinsson out. It wasn't that they bumped Hamonic into Edvinsson's spot. It's that they bumped both of those two guys down, Hamonic and ASP down. And Johansson, who was already starting to creep up toward 20 minutes a night, he and Bernard-Docker, who I think has had his best stretch over the last 2 weeks as well, they're playing really good hockey. Now, it's interesting. This complicates things in some ways for Steve Yzerman, because I think it was, and I still think they need to add a D no matter what. I just think with where the coach's usage of Sandin-Pellikka has been, you're going to need a D that you really trust in the playoffs. But Johansson was a guy who coming into this season, I thought could push for 20 minutes a night based on what we saw in the second half of last year, based on what we saw in training camp. That player is showing up now. And I think it's an interesting way that kind of changes the calculus. He's not necessarily like playoff style in how you view him. Like he's still a skinny, kind of more skating oriented defenseman as opposed to the big, tough, rough and tumble playoff D. But he's playing really well. And I think that's a very encouraging thing for the Red Wings.
I ultimately agree with you in terms of they should add more support, and the playoff style absolutely would be a concern if they're up against, a Bruins team, for example, in the first round. But this is a huge step. And we talked so much about, if Marco Kasper turned it around, that would be the biggest net gain for the Red Wings that you can imagine in the second half. And I still believe that is the biggest net gain, and you hope to see this 5-game stretch continue. But yeah, with Johansson, then it's no longer a automatic, Edvinsson's out and this team is absolutely screwed. This is like 5 years ago style defense where they have absolutely nothing behind Mo Seider. Extremely impressive. And if they can get that settled, then it's not like, we need 2 top 4 guys. One addition in your depth might be enough to give you some confidence in a playoff round.
I think what this allows the Red Wings to do is be picky. Because we talked about the forward configuration where they have 3 lines that are rolling right now in an offensive capacity, and then a 4th line that's definitely holding its weight in the depth role. If the Red Wings bring in a depth forward, who are they replacing right now? There's no point. If a Jason Robertson or a Robert Thomas comes available, obvious upgrade, but if you're going for that tier 2 level of trade target, it almost feels redundant in the way Johansson and JBD are going, and the depth defense role now, it almost feels like the same conversation. Like a depth guy just feels redundant because you're getting quality. Even Sandin-Pellikka has his moments for as much as he struggles. You got to take your medicine with your rookie at some point. So we've talked about it being this year. And yeah, if you have to shelter the hell out of him, but the other 5 are playing great, it's not the worst thing in the world. So do you go trade for a number 5D? I'd rather roll with these guys. If a legitimately good, top 3 level defenseman comes out, you're obviously never going to say no to that. But I think from that standpoint, it's encouraging just to see the progression from the Kaspers and the Johanssons and the JBDs. But it's also exciting to know that Steve Yzerman doesn't have to make a panic move. He can go for a dude he thinks is a legit dude, not just a guy.
Well, hold that thought, because later in the show, I'm going to want to read you some names and see if you're a yay or a nay, because the defense market's interesting this year. Like, there's really, now that Quinn Hughes and Rasmus Andersson are off of it, the names on it are they're right on the edge of what I think classify. I mean, I think they're mostly upgrades, especially like for playoff hockey, but it's kind of right on the edge there. So there's a few I'm interested to get your thoughts on as we go along here.
Well, yeah, Rasmus Andersson might be off of it, Max, but Justin Falk is practically Rasmus Andersson, apparently. So that's a moot point.
He does have an extra year of term. Like I saw the Elliot Friedman report as well that the ask is similar. That's the only way that I could justify it, is that Andersson true rental. Now, granted, does anyone think it's a true rental? I certainly do not. And I don't think I would pay that price for Justin Falk, but he does have the extra year of term. I do think he's got a very compelling case as the best D remaining on the market to get a first round pick. We'll get into all this, I promise.
Last guys, I want to talk about the forwards, because you mentioned, JBD and Albert Johansson. Shout out to Trent Yanni, by the way. Like, it's easy to look at Mo Seider and say, yeah, that is the biggest pillar of success for the Red Wings defensive group. And obviously, yes, he is. But a lot of good work has been done with the Red Wings depth, and you can see the steadiness grow in their game. And so credit where credit is due there. But over to the forwards, Marco Kasper, who we talked about a little bit here, and Lucas Raymond, who, what was it, a week and a half ago, we were talking about, has been struggling as much as Dylan Larkin 5-on-5, and he looks as much himself as he has this season, I think, right now.
He's on pace for 90 points, and that's with the 2 games that he missed. He's got a still chance to threaten 30 goals here. I mean, he's at 18 through 51 games, teams at 53. He'd have to pick it up just a little bit, but it's in play for him. I think anyone would have taken that at the start of the year. 30 goals, 90 points from Lucas Raymond. I think you're picking that as a huge part of the recipe for them to be a playoff team.
Yeah, I think, like, if you talk about at the start of the season, if that was Lucas Raymond's stat line, we'd all probably nod our head and be like, yeah, this is going to be a really good year for the Detroit Red Wings if Lucas Raymond's producing at that clip. So, yeah, it's exactly what you want to see from him.
So Detroit upcoming has the LA Kings at home on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then we'll be back with you on Wednesday as we eke closer and closer to the Olympic break here. Speaking of breaks, we're going to take one of our own, and when we're back, we're going to get into that trade discussion that Max was teasing. First, a word from our sponsors. Back after this. Going online without ExpressVPN, that's like letting Evan hold your wallet near a hot dog stand. You're putting a lot of trust in a volatile unknown, and that's going to go sideways eventually. Most of the time, you might be fine until you're suddenly wondering how your data ended up in the wrong hands. That's why we use ExpressVPN. Anytime we're on public Wi-Fi or just watching a game at home, our data can be exposed. ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so your information stays protected even on sketchy networks. One of the biggest reasons ExpressVPN stands out is how simple it is to use. You open the app, tap one button, and you're protected. It also works on basically everything: phones, laptops, tablets, so you're covered no matter how you're online. On top of that, it's rated #1 by top tech reviewers, which we care a lot about, and that made it an easy choice for us. Personally, I've used ExpressVPN when trying to watch a hockey game that wasn't available in my region, which we've all run into, and also when I had to use a stream that looked, let's say, less than trustworthy. ExpressVPN let me access that game and protect myself at the same time, which is exactly what you want in that situation. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wingedwheel. That's expressvpn.com/wingedwheel to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months. expressvpn.com/wingedwheel. Welcome back. Trade season. Max, you have a trade board coming out on the Athletic Detroit, and we'll get into that in a second, but I think the first thing we have to do is answer the question. Simon Edvinsson has been out the past 2 games. Yes, the Red Wings have had 3 of those 4 points, and not in easy ways, like they were on the road with travel, but, it looked rough in the Minnesota game. Does Steve Yzerman need to make a move? Brad, before the break, you said you can be picky. I lean a little bit more towards, if you have any ambitions of winning a playoff round, you do need to. Where are you guys at?
I'm with you, Ryan. I look at their top half of their defense with everyone healthy, Edvinsson, Seider, and Sherratt, and I go, yep, that looks roughly like a playoff top 4 with missing one piece. I look at the bottom half of it, and I look at Johansson, Bernard Docker, and Sandin-Pellikka, and I think, yep, those all 3 look like a maybe a third pair in an ideal world. If you're bumping one of them up, I think you're asking a lot of that player. So I think my play would be to go get someone who can play with Ben Sherratt on the second pair.
And that, for the most part, aligns with where I'm at. Like, adding a depth guy is redundant. Like, if you're trading for a guy, trade for him. But he's got to be a dude. I'm still not huge on the rental aspect of this because, one, if you get a legit top 4 defenseman as a rental, you're probably paying a pretty good price. And I don't think the Red Wings are there yet on a rental. If it's a guy with term, now you have my attention. And if it's a really good guy with a lot of term, I will pay a lot of assets to make that happen. But yeah, for the most part, I kind of align with where you guys are at. And that's why I like the idea of he can be picky.
I don't know that I can get to he can be picky, though. And the reason I say that is because we don't have a big sample of Johansson and Bernard Docker going great. I think they both have the tools and the skill set. And with Johansson, he has the pedigree where you can say it's likely, or you can see a world where they're going to go great for the remainder of the season. But I don't know that you can guarantee it. And then when you get into playoff hockey, teams are going to really try to hammer those guys. And that makes you thin, because what do? You play Edvinsson inside a billion minutes a night, but Edvinsson's out right now. It proves, like, even your best players, your ironest of Iron Men can go down, and then things get bad for you fast. Like, I don't think the Boston Bruins are a better hockey team than the Detroit Red Wings this season whatsoever. I think they have Detroit's number because I think the style of game they play, which is akin to what Detroit would run into in the playoffs, probably, is kind of a thorn in Detroit's side. So I want backup. Like, I want a safety net. You can't get cute with, oh, this player is going great in this slot, so you don't overdo it elsewhere. I think if you have an opportunity to add a guy, I know we keep talking about Justin Falk since he brought him up a while back, Max, but that's a guy who has more than just this season remaining, and it builds in some natural buffer for Sandin-Pellikka to grow into his role even beyond this season, and he answers some questions now. He's probably not depth, what you're thinking, Brad. You're probably saying he fits more of that top 4 mold, but I don't know. I don't hate the idea of adding a guy who can play that kind of eat up minutes and not get dominated physically kind of game.
So, to touch on that, if the Red Wings, now, again, not making any proclamations here because I've been burned before. The Red Wings, as it stands right now, should make the playoffs. Not saying they're going to, but they should.
Coward.
So if we go on the assumption that they do, and they go into a first-round matchup with whoever, Boston, Florida, Tampa, a physical team, and ASP and Albert Johansson get beat to hell, and they get dominated, and they get exposed, and the Red Wings go out in 5 games. Good. I'm not saying good for this season, but these are guys that you're going to be likely counting on for cup runs. I don't think any of us here has dreams of a Stanley Cup this year. We live in a reality that is actually real. These guys have to learn. And again, if you're getting an actual impact player, yes, you always take upgrades. I am never saying no to upgrades, especially upgrades if they have term. But again, I've used the term, you have to take your medicine with young guys and rookies eventually. All these guys are going to play their first playoff game eventually. This year, if they make the playoffs, is going to feel like there's a grand bonus and everybody's going to be happy. The Red Wings can lose in 4 straight games, 8-0 each game. And I think we all look at the season and go, what a success. So if you ever want Johansson and Sandin-Pellikka, and even if you look up front, Kasper and Finnie and all these guys who haven't been there before and are young, this is the year to learn, because you have to eventually, if the Red Wings, let's go best case scenario here after this season. The Red Wings go into the playoffs, they get killed, everything I'm talking about happens. They go into free agency or the trade market and they land a Jason Robertson or a Robert Thomas. Now all of a sudden you're looking at this team going, maybe this might actually be the year they make a run. I don't want to be worrying about Sandin-Pellikka or Albert Johansson never having played a meaningful minutes in a playoff game. Maybe with Sandin-Pellikka's case, not even getting into the lineup. I want those guys to struggle this year if they're ever going to struggle, because there's way less expectation than there will be next year. Because again, if Yzerman does what he needs to do, that cup window has the possibility to ramp up quickly.
I was with you for the first half of that. I did not like 4 straight games of 8-0 losses because for 2 reasons. One, I do think that would very much dramatically impact how people view this season. It would look like, oh, they got in and then they got exposed in the playoffs. And I think people would view that differently. Number 2, like Sandin-Pellikka right now is only playing 9, 10, 11, 12 minutes anyway. Like it's not he's not playing 19 minutes in a playoff game. If they get there, they're not going to deploy him like that. And I think that they owe it to the group to try and play as many playoff games as possible, which means trying to win around. I'm not saying sacrifice everything to get an upgrade there, but I think you can be like, we look at the depth of their system right now, the number of B prospects they have. I just put out a top 10 prospects ranking last week. There were 3 or 4 more guys I considered to be on that list who are absolutely available, like worth making available. I'm not going to say they are available because I don't know that for sure, but I just think like the number of prospects that they have, you're not going to have room for all these guys. You can talk about some of your D that are knocking on the door. You can talk about some forwards that are getting into their 20s and have not yet made it. I think there's a very real case to be made that you can part with a decent asset for a rental, and that's worth it if it means potentially winning a playoff round and getting 4, 5, 6 more games out of it. That's how you build up that experience, even if it is only for a guy like Sandin-Pellikka or a guy like Johansson, 10 to 14 minutes a night. So that's where I would kind of differ. But I do agree with you. Like, you don't want to be going crazier. You shouldn't be spending in the same way that the Dallas Stars or the Carolina Hurricanes or teams that have urgency to win while their window is open and they're maybe getting toward the end of that window. That's not the dynamic for the Red Wings, but there is incentive, I think, to try to win around. I don't think it's all gravy if you get in.
Yeah, I think the learning, like I don't disagree with your thesis there, Brad, that those guys need to learn so that they can do what they need to do to be more prepared for next season. And this is almost even a little bit unfair to Johansson because this is a hypothesis with him. I think we can almost guarantee that's how the playoff round would go for ASP. It remains to be seen with Johansson, but still, I think they can get that from the limited deployment that's likely to happen from ASP. It's not going to take much for him to be like, okay, yeah, I'm a skilled guy and I know I have a future in this league, but I understand what I need to do in the weight room and in the kitchen to make sure that I'm more ready for this next season. Max, you mentioned don't go crazy. And you have a trade board coming up. What are some of the names on that you thought might be striking for Red Wings fans and for Steve Yzerman?
So here's what I noticed, first of all, is that after Justin Falk, the number of guys that I would qualify as a definite top 4D is 0. There are a couple that I think there's a good solid case that they are. One of them is Mario Ferraro in San Jose. He is currently a top 4D for San Jose, but it is for San Jose. And I think that's a big difference in being on an Eastern Conference playoff team. He plays 20 minutes a night. He blocks, he hits, he competes. That's a player who I would be interested in if I were the Detroit Red Wings, but it's debatable. Is he a 4? Is he a 5? And I think that's kind of a theme. Connor Murphy is a guy in Chicago. Right now, he's on the 3rd pair for Chicago. But I think that's largely because the Blackhawks are pushing their young players up the lineup. Connor Murphy's been a 19, 20-minute-a-night guy. When I think about a Ben Sherratt-Connor Murphy pair in the playoffs, that sounds about like a second pair for a playoff team. Not a cup team, but a playoff team and potentially a team that could win a round. Carson Soucy in New York is a guy that can play both sides. Brett Kulak in New York is a guy who can play both sides. I think we're starting to stretch more into the 5s. You're asking to be 4s territory with some of those names. But that doesn't mean that they might not still be an upgrade over what Detroit has. And I don't think, especially those last couple, I think Ferraro can probably charge a premium because of the workload he plays. But Murphy, Soucy, Kulak, I think you're probably getting asked for a 3rd and a prospect, something in that range. Maybe it's even a either or. I think the Rangers got Soucy for a 3rd. And then there's one more name I had. You guys like Logan Stanley. That I think would be the biggest stretch to ask him to play top 4 minutes. He's never done it. Winnipeg didn't even play him 12 minutes a night. But he is the type of player that you like to have around in a playoff series. So even though I don't think he actually addresses the need that we're talking about, and maybe he would fall more into the category of depth, I still think the profile is such that you should probably give it a look. So those are the D names that I kind of circled around. They're all from Chris Johnston's trade board. I'm not saying that there's not other D out there who are more exciting. You'd love to get Marcus Pettersson from Vancouver. I have not seen a reason to believe that he's available just yet, right? Maybe some more guys shake loose as teams start to fall out of it. speaking of St. Louis D, if Colton Parayko were ever to become available, I'd give up a haul for Colton Parayko. He'd be amazing. A right side of your D with Morris Seider and Colton Parayko, that'd be unreal. I have no reason to believe right now that Colton Parayko is available. He's not on the trade boards. So those are just that's a little bit of an asterisk, is that when I say the market looks a little shallow, that's just who kind of is reported to be out there right now.
Well, I mean, I've personally said bring me Logan Stanley for the reason you said, Max. Like, he's not going to be a bona fide top 4 guy. Might still be an improvement on what you have depending on how your depth's playing. But I think the biggest improvement that he brings, other than the physicality, is the fact that he punches Kachucks. But the problem is that kind of goes out the window because Ottawa's so far out of it right now in terms of the playoff race. Florida's only 5-ish points out, give or take. So they might get back in it, but they look like they have their troubles. So there might be no Kachucks to punch, at which case, what's the point of trading all that?
I'm surprised. He's only got 100 hits in one season. That doesn't feel like how I square with his profile of player in my head. But I don't know if that's I'm trying to kind of trust the data over just my perceptions. But what do you guys think of that? Does that surprise you that that's the stat?
Look at how the Jets fans talk about him. And I feel like there's a few of him on every team where they're like, yeah, it'd be nice to keep him, but whatever number he's talking about is absolutely insane. And they're saying they would rather let him walk. So I think there's a little bit of probably the grass is always greener going on here, where we're looking at him and making him out to be a bit more than he actually is in the physicality regard. Probably still a net improvement based on what Detroit has. But yeah, I think it's a good point to point out, Max.
Brad, which of those names that I said interest you, and which would you kind of be out on? Brett Kulak played 20 plus minutes a night for Edmonton on a cup run last year. I think that's a good player, but he's also, is he that different than Albert Johansson? I mean, maybe he's just a more advanced version of the same type.
I think it comes down to what you believe philosophically about the modern NHL. And I know that's a huge statement and a huge question to ask, but there's Brett Kulak and then a bunch of big guys who can play physical that don't move the puck well. And I like defense who can skate and move the puck well. And I understand you need some meanness in your D, but Edvinsson, Seider, Sherratt, the Red Wings aren't necessarily lacking that right now like they have in previous years. I like Kulak. I like him as a depth defenseman. So if I'm looking at anybody from that list with the understanding of what they're likely to cost, he's about the only one there that interests me. But I do have a lot of time for Brett Kulak.
One guy I've been sort of eyeing on as well, seeing what the Rangers might do, is Carson Soucy. Steve Yzerman likes big defensemen, and Carson Soucy's 6'5", over 200 pounds. It's not going to be a marquee name. He's not going to, drastically push up the Red Wings playoff percentage, but he averages 15 minutes a night. You could probably get him half retained, and you could get him for cheap, I think, from the Rangers. So if the Red Wings are looking to move up the floor in terms of talent for their defense, I think Carson Soucy could potentially be a fit there.
His pair with Will Borgen stood out to me both times the Red Wings played the Rangers earlier this season. And granted, I like Borgen better. I don't think Borgen's available. That'd be the preferable. He's also the true right shot D as opposed to Soucy, but I believe Soucy can play both sides, and that's kind of unusual. You usually think of the guys that can play their offhand as being the smaller, more mobile types, but that's at least one advantage of Soucy, and I've seen him be good this year, which is, an obvious plus.
When I think of Kulak too, I'm like, who's the GM there? It's Kyle Dubas. And I mean, I feel like every time you could criticize him for something in Toronto, it seems like he learned a lesson and has brought that to Pittsburgh. He's not been perfect, but at the same time, he is driving a hard bargain, and he's on a little bit of a roll right now in terms of getting returns. And I just don't trust what that price would be. Unless it's like no one takes him up on it and you get him at the 11th hour, then yeah.
So in theory, I feel like it should be a similar kind of ballpark, second or third round pick, or like a solid B prospect. Pittsburgh's in a playoff spot, and it continues to kind of defy logic to me. I mean, Sidney Crosby is amazing. I don't think I would have ever seen this coming at the start of this season, but that also matters too, because Pittsburgh can really hold out and be like, well, if you don't give us something really good for him, we're just going to hold on to him and try to make the playoffs with him and see what happens. So that's a factor too that could drive the price up on Kulak. I got some forwards if you want, Ryan.
Well, before we do that, what do you think about Whitecloud? Just acquired in trade. Maybe they flip him as well. Do you take Zach Whitecloud off of Calgary? Do you have any interest in that player?
Yeah, that's probably a good shout. That maybe should have been on the board. I think he'd also fall into that category of like fives who you're asking to be a four, but that's true of a lot of those guys that I said. So that's a good shout.
and it's optimistic, right? Like it's a little bit of pretending that you're in the ideal situation, but you're just trying to make lemons out of lemonade. There aren't 3-4 guys readily available at all. Like Detroit would pay the price, but they really aren't out there in a guaranteed way. And so you're like, oh yeah, we're going to try to do what Tampa Bay has done and turn nobodies into top pair players. That's kind of your best bet because there's not much else. So with that, what forwards do you have for us, Max?
All right, so I think the one that's worth taking a huge swing on is Robert Thomas. We would all agree with that. Doesn't require much debate. 26-year-old right shot center with back-to-back point per game seasons, locked up for 5 more years after this one at an awesome number, 8.125. No doubt everyone on this pod would take Robert Thomas, would pursue Robert Thomas. It's a matter of cost, I think, is the question. And how, because to get him, like St. Louis has no incentive to do this for anything less than a king's ransom. To me, I think the bar is right around what Quinn Hughes got, which is 3 or 4 premium assets, depending on how you want to classify Liam Ogren. He was a former first-round pick. He had not been off to a great run. So do you call that 4 first-round equivalents? Do you call it 3? I don't know, but that's the ballpark to me. It's certainly going to take a young center, no doubt about that. It's certainly going to take a first-round pick, no doubt about that. And it's probably going to take one of your recent first-round pick as well. So I think that's the minimum to get in the door. Then you're probably also topping it with at least like a William Wallander, or maybe you're going off the NHL roster and you're dipping into a Soderblom or a Johansson type, like a young roster player who has a little bit of upside left. To me, the way I look at it is, this is how I looked at it with the Hughes trade too, and this is why it made sense for Minnesota to do this, because it was like, what would you pay to guarantee that Zeev Buium becomes Quinn Hughes? And the answer was Marco Rossi, a first-round pick, and Liam Ogren. What would you pay to guarantee that, I'm just going to use this name because he's a prospect and he plays the right position, what would you pay to guarantee that Nate Danielson turns into Robert Thomas? And I think the answer is probably a first-round pick, Carter Bear, and one of those kind of young roster players, or at least roster-ready players. That's my guess for what the ballpark would have to be. I might be a little low. I was pretty resolute when we talked about Quinn Hughes that, Simon Edvinsson was a bridge too far. That's what it would have taken, it seems like. So maybe I'm a little low here too. What do you guys think?
So given what St. Louis needs, I think my offer starting, and this is going to be extreme and I know people are going to flinch, I'm only going to go with 3 assets and you guys can throw in what you think is the 4th asset that is fair. Nate Danielson, first round pick, Trey Augustine.
That's less than what I said.
I know. I'm letting you guys pick the 4th,
yeah.
But I think Danielson and Augustine check long-term boxes for St. Louis that they need. First-round pick is always the fun wild card that's included in everything. Now, does that next asset have to be a defenseman? Can it be a winger? Or are you looking at Max Plant, Carter Bear? Or is that now in the category of too much? But I think that's the ballpark I'm looking at. I'm starting with those 3 as these are the absolute centerpieces of this trade. And let's just fill out the edges to make sure that everybody's happy here. But I think that starter pack would have a lot of appeal to St. Louis, and I'm not balking at that at all.
I'm not either, because you look at what it would open up for Detroit. Long term, now you have Dylan Larkin and Robert Thomas as your lock top 2 centers for basically a 5-year window here. You have Marco Kasper, who you can comfortably either play on the wing where he is right now, top line left wing where he looks pretty good. He can become your 3rd line center. Either option, it's a very good situation. You either have some of the best center depth, if not maybe the game breaker that the Colorados and the Edmontons of the world have, but some extremely strong center depth, or you're going to have just a really excellent top 6, well-rounded, and you can play your JT Compher in your 3C spot, and you still got Michael Brandsegg-Nygard on the way. Finnie, I think, is going to continue to evolve. Either way, I think you're going to have an excellent top 9 if you make that move, and it's going to cost you a little bit, right? Like we're talking about 3 first-round equivalents there, maybe 4, depending on how you value Augustine at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's an area of positional depth. Like, I really like Augustine. I think his track record is excellent. I recently ranked him 1 spot above Kosa. It's really more of a coin flip for me, but I just think with the age and the runway left, that's why I did it. But I think you could justify a move like that for a player that sets you up that way for the future.
Yeah, there aren't really any Red Wings players or prospects outside of the same ones we named, I think, for the potential Quinn Hughes deal, where I'm like, yeah, you can't touch him. I draw the lines in the exact same spot I drew them for the Quinn Hughes potential deal, where you don't want to do Edvinsson because it kind of puts you back on the same foot that you just tried to get off of. But other than that, like ASP would make you flinch, but you still do it. Any one of your previous first round picks, you love the guys to varying degrees, but you can see why you would absolutely make the move. Even Carter Bear, who is just this past year's first round pick, you do it still because the certainty, like you mentioned, Max, that is contract certainty. It's an amazing cost on a rising cap, and it enables you to go out and do other things. It's pie in the sky, but I mean, if St. Louis goes terribly and they really commit to the rebuild, I haven't seen Thomas's name like, this is a guaranteed thing to happen, but it's starting to get out there. And so if there's smoke, you look to see if there's fire, and this is where you're like, okay, I've been waiting, I've been patient. I'm not going to make a move unless it makes sense long term. This is pretty much gift wrap for you in a way, even more than Quinn Hughes was, because Quinn Hughes didn't come with the contract certainty.
Well, that's the big point of this all. To me, as a trade asset right now, Robert Thomas is more valuable than Quinn Hughes. He's not a better player than Quinn Hughes, but 5 more years at a great cap hit. Like Hughes, there's no guarantee you were getting an extension, and his next contract's going to be $14+ million. Like you can get Robert Thomas and then add a $6 million player, right? Like it's just in the world we live in of every dollar matters. A top 6 center who can produce at a point per game for $8 million and change or whatever it is, that is damn near the most valuable asset you can have in the NHL right now.
This conversation is so much more rational than the last one we had about a centerman who has a potential to be a point per game player. I'm far more on board with Robert Thomas than I am with expensive, bad Elias Pettersson.
Well, he's on the list too, but I kind of tend to agree with you.
I can't do it, Max.
No, it's okay.
I haven't seen my therapist since the last episode.
I heard the last episode. I think you guys are on the ball, and he's also got a full no move clause, right? And like Thomas, it should be said, has a full no trade as well. But I tend to agree. Thomas is much more the Steve Yzerman type than Elias Pettersson is. It's a better contract. He's probably going to be more. I mean, he's definitely going to be more expensive than Elias Pettersson would be in terms of asset cost. But I think you're totally comfortable with that. I tend to agree with you, Evan. I put him on the list because how can you not when you see his name and you know what the upside is? But I would tend to agree with you. A couple other forwards that I think are worth at least discussing. Vincent Trocheck. This is a player in New York who is, an Olympian, whatever you think about that. He was at least going to be a fringe Olympian. He's certainly the Red Wings type. I have 2 reservations on this. One is he enough of an upgrade over Andrew Kopp to justify what the cost is going to be and to justify breaking up what the chemistry has been? Like that, Kopp's been excellent since he's been in that role. So to me, Thomas is enough of an upgrade there that you go, sorry, it's just got to happen. I don't know that Trocheck is so much better than Andrew Kopp, although we never talked about Andrew Kopp for Team USA and Vincent Trocheck is on Team USA. Is he so much of an upgrade that you're willing to do a first plus, which is what I think it's going to take to make that happen, and then swap him out? Or maybe you could put him on the wing. I don't know, but
age, contract, redundancy. I really, really like Vincent Trocheck, the hockey player. This is a hard no for me.
Really? Hard no?
I don't think I'm at hard no. I think I'm like, Vincent Trocheck screams someone is going to pay out the nose, like Brock Nelson type deal. But I'd love Vincent Trocheck on the Red Wings. So I'm not hard no. I'm like tentative yes.
Cool. Your asking price is a first round pick and pick a prospect. Call it Carter Bear, because Cal Ritchie and a first round pick was the cost for Brock Nelson as at the time a rental. So you're getting contract control with Trocheck as well. Price probably goes up from there. And for me, the contract coupled with his age is not a positive.
Contract's good. 5.6, 2 more years.
The AAV, but he's 32, 33 years old. Like, how many premium years does he have left? Like, there is a chance that this contract ages beautifully. But the Red Wings are so far past the point in their rebuild where there's a chance is an acceptable answer. Like, you got to be going for the definite upgrades. And again, the emergence or reemergence of Andrew Kopp this year really hinders this for me, because if Andrew Kopp sucked this year, and we were still sitting here going, oh my God, we need a center desperately. Yeah, you're about ready to pay for whoever's half decent on the market. But with the position the Red Wings are in and how consistently good Andrew Kopp has been, I have a hard time justifying the cost for Vincent Trocheck.
All right, how about a true winger then? It is a similar age, it is a similar contract, but Brian Rust. Now, again, same caveat with Pittsburgh. They're in a playoff spot right now, makes it probably harder to pry him out. But the player type that we've been talking about next to Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond for 2 years is just literally Brian Rust.
For me, it's kind of like Trocheck. I love the player. I think because of reputation and not being Olympian, the asking price won't be as insane. I still think it's high. I don't think I'm at give a first-round pickup for Brian Rust, but I'm close.
That pick's going to be in the 20s, Brad. Oops, I just said it.
This man's tripling down. That's what I was going to say. Like, the first-round picks don't mean what they used to. I'm not saying go throw away picks, 18 to 21 for no reason, but if it's a guy who you think can help you out for a few years, call it Trocheck or whoever, okay, then yeah, they're not going to have their most premium years ahead of them. But at the same time, Trocheck isn't a player where you're trying to have him maintain some unsustainable scoring pace. You know the kind of guy he is. He's going to produce for you, but not like out of this world production. He plays a kind of game where he can age with it. He's a pretty shrewd player. And you think about Brian Rust as well, obviously different positions there. I think you don't do it just to do it. I agree with you, Brad. But you start to think about it. You can't have a hardline mentality of like, I'm not doing this unless it's, Robertson served up to me on a platter or Robert Thomas served up to me on a platter. You kind of at some point have to go and make something happen. And I'm arguing against myself because I'm not saying you overpay for the guys we just talked about, but it's not that you have to win the deal 100% hand over fist over the other GM. You start to do some boy math there and see if it doesn't help you now and a little bit next year and a little bit next year, and then you trust on the cascade and knock-on effects. Does that make sense?
It is, and I think that this one maybe even falls more in line with what Brad was saying earlier about your young players and making sure that they play enough in the playoffs, right? Like if you go get Brian Rust, it has a direct impact in how much you can or rather can't play Marco Kasper, play Emmett Finnie in the playoffs. And I think that is much more where I kind of sympathize with how Brad was talking about that earlier. It's true of the other names on my list too. I don't really love the rest of these names, but they just feel like they should be on there. Steven Stamkos, Jake DeBrusk, Blake Coleman. These are all guys who can help. Steven Stamkos is an awesome player, right? And you could play him on your top line and he's a proven playoff winner. But you kind of already overloaded on top power play right-handers. And at 5-on-5, like, yeah, he's going to make you better. Is that worth the trade-off of what it's going to cost in ice time for your Kaspers and your Finnies? DeBrusk, like, he's a heavy kind of offense that you want. I think Stamkos has a little bit of that in him. I don't know that you like either of those contracts really either. They should be lower cost, I think, than what we're talking about for some of those other names. But that's where, like, it kind of circles back to what I think it was Brad made the point earlier. You can be a little bit choosy. You don't need to go do this at all costs. I think it would really help to get a top 4D. But I think at forward, you can certainly be choosy.
For all my arguing with Brad, I do agree. I think at forward, you definitely be choosy. I like Detroit's forward group right now. I like it even without Dylan Larkin playing at the level I think he can play at. I think anytime a line or two has been slumping, you still have one or two other lines that's been producing. Their forward mix-up is good this year. And barring, multiple big injuries, I don't think you need to go in and force something. Defense is where I focus, and defense is where I'm more willing to throw a dart and say, here's hoping.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. Like, there's a lot of bad contracts out there. Like, I don't know if I'm a big fan of Steven Stamkos. I don't know if I'm all that interested in current age Steven Stamkos. But yeah, I think the biggest need for the Red Wings is on defense. If you bring up the floor, I think it still allows you to get the rookies into games, or the non-playoff defensemen into games, and they can learn from that while still solidifying your playoff chances and not really, damaging the future of the Detroit Red Wings.
A lot of this is then going to bleed into the offseason as well, right? Because you want Robert Thomas. Yeah, St. Louis is in Dallas, and so they might be motivated to move him, but they're not in any rush if they do. And you want Jason Robertson. Well, I don't know what Dallas would do there if they think they can't sign him. And right now, that situation doesn't seem dire. I don't really bank on them trading him anytime soon. So, yeah.
Is he that much better than Pettersson for you guys?
Robertson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which Pettersson?
The expensive one. Because he's going to make more than expensive Pettersson. Like, Pettersson's got an elite shot, too.
Less
I'm going to
baggage.
let Evan handle this one.
Less baggage. I think his... I know he plays wing and Pettersson can play center, but it's like...
I would view those guys as in a tier, but it feels like the narrative would say Robertson is clearly above, and maybe I'm off on that, but...
I think if you are going for Robertson over Pettersson, you're paying the premium for peace of mind. The consistency that Jason... In his down years, he's still been a point per game. Pettersson's down years, you're not even sure he's a first liner. Like there's a big gulf there. I think at their peak, at their best, they are very, very, very comparable players. I'm willing to pay more because I have a lot more confidence in I know what Jason Robertson is versus who knows what we get out of Elias Pettersson.
Robertson has as many goals as Pettersson does points this year. So I think you know where I land on
it. Little better environment.
For sure. But, track record stands. We saw a 100-point season from Elias Pettersson. Is that the potential or is that a flash in the pan? And like I said last episode, I'm not willing to pay those kind of assets to make that gamble. So I like Jason Robertson's game a lot more. And he's not a guy who relies on speed. If you can get Jason Robertson into the Detroit Red Wings organization and you can lock that down for a long time, like he's going to have a lot of productive years. So if the cost was the exact same, it would be Jason Robertson for me 100 out of 100 times.
All right. Let's jump into some NHL notes here very quickly before getting into overtime. I'm going to expose myself. Maybe I'll be called an idiot as usual in the comments on this one. But, I sat down and I turned on the Golden Knights Leafs game because I thought, all right, Marner's returned to Toronto. Fans are into it. They're booing him hard. I thought, they handled the production of it really well. I thought the broadcast was good. I was like, if I was a Leafs fan, I'd be emotional watching this, really conflicting emotions. And, Elliot Friedman had a great write-up on Sportsnet as well. More details on that story. None of them, shocking in terms of the nature of them, but some pretty interesting details in the behind the scenes. And I don't know, I guess I am an idiot for expecting anything different, but I felt like that was such a missed opportunity from Toronto to just set the tone and inject some life into that morgue of an arena and that morgue of an organization. And they just came out like a wet blanket and let themselves get dominated by the Golden Knights. They let Marner go untouched for several shifts. It felt like he was, making offensive plays. Like, I've never seen a more sauceless team than the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm sure I've said that before. I'm sure I've said the following, which is whatever the Florida Panthers have, if they're at one end of the scale over the past two cups, Toronto is the exact inverse at the other end of the scale. I can't believe they didn't go out and just run the guy. I'm not saying, Marner deserves to be run. That's not it at all. It's about setting the tone on the ice and capturing a little bit of emotion and spirit for a team that desperately needs it. I'm like, what a waste of my time to have turned this game on. Turned it off. I was like, this is stupid. They're not going to do anything. I can't believe they wasted that.
You can't believe the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Club did not step up to the intensity of the moment. You can't believe that, Ryan?
That's Team USA captain Austin Matthews right there.
God, I hope not.
Shook his head. You're not wrong. I'm stupid for saying I can't believe it. I should have known.
Hey, they booed him in warm-ups. They did their job, right?
The fans were trying to do their job. Bless them for a moment.
The fans booed him in Vegas. The fans did their job and then some.
To go in a hole like that, a 2-0 hole in the first was 6 minutes of the game. And you just feel like, oh, okay, well, that's that, right? Like it was so encapsulating for the entire saga, right? And the fans booed him, like whatever. Like I don't think it was anything egregious. It doesn't hold a candle to the John Tavares return to the island. It was juiceless is a good way to put it. Sauceless, did you say?
I use both interchangeably.
Yeah, they're juiceless, they're sauceless, they're a dry franchise right now, and that's a bad place to be.
Their most interesting player is William Nylander, who, while being out up in the suite, one game shows up in the tank top. Was it tonight? He had to issue an apology because he saw the broadcast camera on him and started giggling and stuck the finger. Like, just, I don't know if there's a plot to lose, but they've lost it over there. And it's like, this team isn't so bad on paper where they're so down in the dumps and they have no one to even get rid of. They have a lot of quality guys. They are, on Vancouver level almost, of like they're playing way below their means here.
I've made this point before, but I think the thing that would bother me in Toronto is like they did the thing that everyone said they had to do. And that was like, oh, you got to shake up the core. You got to, granted, they didn't get anything for him. And I think that was always part and parcel of what people were saying, is that you should trade Marner away for a different profile of player of comparable value. But they did the thing that everyone was like, oh, this is what ails you. And I certainly felt like the core was not going to work. And I'm sure I called for them to blow it up too. But this is so much worse. And that's got to be so maddening for them, is that it's like, were they just doomed from the very beginning? I'm sure that's how it feels.
Must be. Anyhow, it's fun from the outside, I got to say. And
what an well that was for Ryan. Must be, anyway.
Tough.
Wouldn't know what that's like.
I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say that so freely, because if we shouldn't speak lightly about those days, the bottom of this rebuild was tough, man. The records that Detroit are setting right now, like, this is the most points, life, energy, smiles in the past 15 years we've seen at Little Caesars Arena or the Joe Louis Arena before that. It's like, yeah, we don't want to go back.
But it's just like all the when I took over on the beat, how many articles did I write about how, the Red Wings need to rebuild so that they can have what the Maple Leafs have or are going to have? And that turned out to be 2 playoff series wins in the entirety of that core. If you had told me that in 2018, I would not have believed you.
I know. We started to get questions a couple of years ago or a few years ago where people were like, whose core would you rather have, Detroit's or Toronto's? And for a while back, it actually extended back even before. It's like when Sider first started to come into play. It was like the answer is still Toronto, because you're like, they have to figure this out eventually. And then the answers start to flip of like, I don't know. You look at the contract, you look at the age, and I can't believe how little they push that conversation the other way.
Well, that's why player type and personality type matters a lot, right? Like, if you just erase the names and said, these are your top 4 players, and it's, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, you would take that all day. Like, wow, those must be amazing players. But it's just the will or lack thereof to push further when it's difficult, when you're in the playoffs in those tough moments that those guys just don't seem to have. And yeah, it would be maddening as a Leaf fan. You watch those guys who are all world talents, some of them top 10, top 5 of their position in the league at moments, and it just never materializes into at least an Eastern Conference final. So it's tough. It would be a maddening position to be in as a fan.
Evan is so spot on with that, because if you told any team, like, do you want a 1C who can score 70 goals and win the Hart Trophy?
I would jump out this window right now to do that.
A running mate for him who's like a consistent 90-point playmaker. You got another 40-goal guy who you can slot in on the wing on your second line, and then like a venerable captain, former number 1 overall pick as your 2C. Like, you strip everything of that. That's like, yeah, that's the dream rebuild. And look at where it got you. Like, it's a great point, Evan.
It's all about the personality of those players, because points are points, but if you can't push through at the hardest moments, doesn't matter how many points you get. Like, I would much prefer a lesser player, but someone who's willing to make those sacrifices to get the team to the next hump. And Leafs just haven't been able to do that.
Even when you look at the top of the lineup, the Leafs core 4, if you compare them against the top core 4 of every other team in the Atlantic, you're not taking the Leafs group over half of them. Like, it is just remarkable.
It's been fun to watch. With that, we're going to take another quick break, and when we're back, the overtime segment on this episode of the Win Wheel Podcast back after this.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Again, the bonus episodes, the Discord, the giveaway, all of that and lots more. You allow us to do everything we do on the show, and you get a little bit more out of it. The bonus episodes feature some outtakes. You might hear us talk about a reality TV series surrounding Dustin Byfuglien, which Max aptly dubbed In the Buff. That was the best one we had. So
I want first cut on some of that conversation. I don't want all of that in the Patreon.
No. I might just be the Byfuglien thing.
What do you mean? It was all Leaf slander. That'll make you the most popular man in Michigan.
Let's jump into some questions from our patrons. Schmidtinho says, hey guys, we often hear about the importance of getting key players in late round gems in the draft. How big is the impact to the rebuild of a 7th and a 6th round pick in the roster being good compared to zero luck in the draft lottery the Wings have had? It's apples and oranges to me. It's massive to the rebuild. I can't say enough how much that accelerates it. Boy, is San Jose doing great with Macklin Celebrini. You know, like it's just a disproportionate effect that first overall pick can have for you. And not even in Detroit specific years. We saw how those drafts went. So I'm not saying, you know, they're worse for having Seider and Raymond and the guys that they have, but still, like, you get lucky when you get lucky, and it's just nothing can touch it in my mind.
I think the better debate is like the Bedard, Levshinov, and Anton Frendel against the 3 that Detroit got without having a top 3 pick, where you go Seider, Edvinsson, Raymond. Which of those 3 would you take?
You're taking the Red Wings 3, but that also gets to a point I wanted to make because we love our crutch. And I use it all the time about the draft lottery screwed us. In the throes of the rebuild where Yzerman took over, because we kind of have to throw what Holland did in the garbage. Seider, right now in a redraft, probably first overall. Raymond in a redraft, he's in the conversation for first overall. Even Edvinsson, with who was taken in that draft, you could make an argument he's probably in the top 3. Like, the Red Wings got peak value in those drafts. I think the biggest bad luck the Red Wings had in their rebuild wasn't that they weren't winning the draft lottery. It's that when they were in the throes of it, the top end of those drafts didn't have a Celebrini, didn't have a Connor McDavid. It was kind of there's really good players there, but you didn't have a chance at that generational guy because they were never available when you were truly bottoming out.
Yep. And I mean, the Rangers are the case study of that, right? They won 2 lotteries. They ended up with Lafreniere and Kakko, and it's forced them to rebuild again. And that's a disaster. And those aren't picks that anyone I think would have made differently. That's based on the year. But Seider's certainly going 1 or 2 in his year now. Raymond, I think, is going 3 after Sanderson and Stützle. I would do it in that order. I think some would do it in Stützle-Sanderson order. Either is viable, but Raymond's in that mix. Like that's the clear-cut top 3. It's interesting on Edvinsson. Like, it's probably Wyatt Johnston is going first overall in a redraft. And then it's choose your flavor between Edvinsson, between Dylan Genther. I think there's one more really, like Owen Power's kind of come around, but I think you're taking Edvinsson ahead of Power right now, right?
100%.
Yeah, so. The Jack Scientist says, I really like Todd and I think he'll take us far. Every time I hear Dan Watson speak, though, he impresses me and he's leading the best AHL team maybe ever. What's the path for an AHL head coach to be in the league? Are Watson's skills too AHL development centered to be successful in the show? Is there any pathway for him to be a coach in Detroit, or will he be snatched up by another organization too quick? I was wondering about that. I think teams are taking notice of what Grand Rapids is doing down there, and they're also going to say, well, he's doing that with a lot of NHL guys, and so we can't say that he has no experience around guys who, belong in the NHL. I would not be surprised to hear that Dan Watson's agent's phone is ringing off the hook pretty soon here, if it's not already. So, I mean, Detroit can bring him up as an assistant, or, you can pay him real well to stay down in the AHL, and you say, just sit tight and we'll figure this thing out. But he's going to be a hot commodity pretty soon, I would imagine.
It's just about impossible to win as much as he is right now and not start to get those looks. Yes, their roster's outstanding. It's loaded with veterans. But you go back and he's done this at every level. He had Toledo as a wagon. Now Grand Rapids looks like it's headed that way. I think the conversation translates up, too, to Sean Horkoff, who built the Griffins, right? And again, some of it is spillover from what they got from Detroit. But the alternative, if they don't have Eric Gustafsson, if they don't have Justin Hall playing big roles for them, is that they have Axel Sandin-Pellikka and possibly Emmett Finnie, and they're probably just as good. So it's there's a lot there, both on the building side and on the steering it side, because I don't know if we've talked enough, and I'd love to get into this at some point. It doesn't have to be today, but the psychological challenges of a season like the Griffins are having, where you're chasing history, that has to be a facet. It's great to win all the time. I'm sure that puts everybody in a good mood, but there's got to be some pressure and some distraction that comes with that too.
Finny the Pooh says it seems like Kasper and Danielson are the center of most speculated trade packages. Who would you rather keep, and who do you think other teams value more now that Kasper has turned things around lately? Really good question.
I think in a lot of trades, and I know I'm guilty of it when we talk about hypothetical trades, you always just look at the ceiling. You're making the trade assuming you're going to get best case scenario, and I think if you look at the package, that's Danielson for most teams, because we've seen Kasper's up and downs in the NHL. But Nate Danielson could still be that number 2, 60, 70 point center with speed and 200-foot game and playmaking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, even though he's got more risk to him. So I think in a trade value standpoint, the hypothetical of Nate Danielson is more valuable than the flashes of what we've seen of Marco Kasper.
I go the other way. I'd say over 40 games, we saw Marco Kasper look like a legit number 2 center. And though the first half of this year didn't go so good, especially as he starts to find it right now, I think teams are going to value knowing, hey, this is what the recipe looks like for this guy to do it at the NHL level. I have seen it with my eyes. So I'd go that way, but it's a very good debate. It's probably isn't 32 GMs aren't agreeing on the answer to the question.
John C. says, can you explain the NHL scheduling and how we've had more games played than everyone else the whole year? It's annoying to look at the standings and having to remember that everyone behind us or tied with us has games in hand. Just quirks of, arena availability, travel availability. It's not always even the Red Wings' fault. It could be the teams in their division. And it is annoying, but think of it this way, and Brad made this point on a recent episode, which is good. That means more teams have more games than Detroit down the stretch when games get harder. Yeah, there's the Olympic break in the way, but Detroit has to play fewer games to lock this thing up. And so they've banked more of their season. So I know everyone, myself included, wants to look ahead at the Tampa Bay Lightning to say, okay, can they take the division? But you're more worried about keeping the pack behind to guarantee yourself a playoff spot. That's the first step for Detroit. So
also think about how many Olympians Tampa has, right? Like they're going to go across teams. So much of Team Canada is from the Tampa Bay Lightning. You got Victor Hedman, you got JJ Moser. This is a team that is going to be tired coming out of the Olympics and have a more brutal schedule coming out of the Olympics.
All right, and then we have a 2-part question here. 2 different people asked very similar things. Ozzy the Great says, what is the reality that Gibson signs an extension? Costa is up next year, and Trey never plays a game as a Red Wing. And then the other one from Sean Gagne says, given that Augustine needs to sign his ELC after the season and Costa needs a new deal as well, does this create a logjam where Augustine might not sign and become a free agent for a better path to the NHL? Does he actually get to Grand Rapids despite Postava, or is he more likely a trade piece? So I want to preface this by saying that notion has come up a few times of like, okay, Augustine hasn't signed and there's the whole NCAA, call it a loophole or not. Every indication I've had is that he's interested in signing. I know that Sean has put out a couple things to say like, yeah, he's interested in being in the Red Wings organization. Like that's not really been a concern that I've been able to back up with anything. So just qualifying this with that. But otherwise, what are your thoughts on the pipeline there?
And the natural path of how everything's laying out, we talked about not even once the Red Wings traded for John Gibson, but when that was even a hypothetical where he had 2 years left, Talbot had 1 year left, you ride that tandem out for a year, you give Kosa the year in Grand Rapids. Congrats, buddy, you're the guy. See if you can do it for a full season, and obviously it's gone great. Talbot's up at the end of this year, you bring Kosa up, you sign Augustine, he's the Grand Rapids guy with Postava. Like, it's all so perfectly laid out that unless something really goes awry here, you have to assume at least mentally, that's what the organization's preparing for.
Agreed. And I think unless something goes awry or unless something like the Robert Thomas opportunity comes up, right, then you can choose to deviate from that plan. But it lays out pretty nicely. It's, Kos is going to be in the NHL next year. Augustine should have the lane to 40-plus starts in Grand Rapids next year. That works for his development. With the college hockey runway, I'm curious, how it changes his timeline in the AHL, but I think you're still looking at more than just 1 year in the American League for most successful goalie prospects. So it's not like a situation where even then it's like Augustine doesn't have to be in the NHL in 2027. It can wait a little longer than that too. It's just whatever's best for his development and what that all dictates.
All right, with that, we're going to take one more quick break here, and when we're back, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast with some important notes. Back after this. Okay, that is another remote episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Forced to do it, but also a great opportunity to have Max Bultman in for this month's Good in the Room. So again, as always, Max, thank you for jumping on the show. Check out Max's work on The Athletic Detroit. We'll link his latest article in the description of this episode. And if you want to support the show, again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. And if you want to help us out, but Patreon's not for you, that's totally okay. Wherever you're getting this podcast, if you want to subscribe, be it YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave a rating, a review, the thumbs up, the little heart. I think there's a hype thing on YouTube now. No idea what it means. I guess I'm too old to understand, but all of that really does help us out. To all of our sponsors, shout out for supporting the show, and to our name level supporters on Patreon, we cannot thank you enough. Arjun Shankar, Aikfer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Klaus Sorensen, Glenn Brabham, Rain Dano, below average ball hockey goalie, Matthew M. Rice, Darb EQ, Sea Lion, Detroit Style, Deep Dish Cider, Bingo Bango, Hassam Al-Qassem, Asher Killian, Kaylin Wood, Alex Toker, That's What I Appreciate About You, Derek Enstam, Matt McKay, Andy Hardcore, Sam Bankston, Citizen High Five, R.A., Aaron Hudson, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, The El Cato, Stephen Ortlieb, Jonathan Miller, Give Blood Fight Probert, DJ Denton, Carl Lieutenant Aluski, Jay Gollum, John Ingalls, CB55, Connor Scovey, Adam Zuiza, Adam Rose, I Miss Pew Suter, Drinking Baileys from a Shoe, Hockeytown Matt, Mr. Kuzi, Chaotic Monkey, Craig Kibble, Yzerman Stan, Podgy713, Clip Clop Nene, Unapologetic Gibson Truther, Griffin Nutt from Grand Rapids, Marty, Causey the OG13, Jeff Pridemore, Eric Hill, Butts Carlton, Best James Bond, Beer League Legend, Alec, Mark Hernandez, Slim Smitty Cards, Grand Rapids Girly, Anna Sleeman, William, Kip Tira Jr., Mike Asher, August, Brian Munn, Improved But Flawed, Chris 99 Jones, Trevor Centerfit, Adams Red Wings Takes, Kurt Chin, Adam Ernie Slander, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Quaz, Dylan Larkin Trade Sacrifice, Antonio Gracias, Matt Keeler, Linda Hull, Connor Leighton, Good Cop, Brad Cop, Josh Yelton, Brad Simmons, that's a great name, Darren Fick, Bex, The Hodag, Daddy Pastor Jake, The 50 Shades of Grace, Maximilian, Commander Ben Baron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Sandin-Pellikka's Pet Pelican, Griffey Boy, JM Rhapsody, Frank Stanley, Rosie Posey, That Other Guy, Pucking Puck Puck, The Hat 123, Tom Yzerplan Respecter, Carl Thames, Nerno, Steven, brand new name level sponsor, AA Ron, Corey Prida, All Motor No Hands, Gene Sullivan, Stinky Britches, James Pridemore, Upernadian, Drop the Puck, Eric Nance, Ann Stanislavski, Jim, Bellingham Massiballs, Wings Finn and St. Louis Scott, Lucas Raitmans, Cops, Gump Lip, Trent Thorough, Grebsky, Evan Beckner, C.E. Hayes, Finney to the Rafters, Jacob Marsh, Faulkness, Fight Night at the Joe, Axel, Sandy Pelican, The Octopi's Ninth Leg, Finney the Pooh, I'm Evan, you're Evan, we're all Evan, Will Utley, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We will talk to you Wednesday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.